Well, a very good morning and thank you so much for choosing your favorite Sunday morning show. That's Media Monitor as we analyze some of the biggest newsmakers of this week. I'm your host, Alicia Jali. Here's what's coming up for you this hour. We start by looking at ANC heavyweight John Block's 15-year jail term for fraud and money laundering. We ask, could this be the end of his political career? Stay tuned to find out. We'll also delve into Hawks head Berning Ntlemeza's fitness to hold office. All this, all after lobby groups, the Helen Suzman Foundation and Freedom Under Law have both filed an application to have him removed from his position. The Department of Home Affairs is working hard to make travel easier for South Africans with the introduction of new child passports. We look deeper into this as they explain further. Another story that sent shockwaves in the country was, of course, the lowered pass mark for mathematics. We ask, is the quality of education system slowly deteriorating? And finally, we look at the celebrations of the historic signing of our country's current constitution. But as usual, it's 900 hours Central African time. Let's take a look at the news that are currently making headlines this morning. Free State Premier Ace Magashule has urged those who called on President Jacob Zuma to resign to do so themselves. He says they clearly don't want to work with the president. Magashule was addressing hundreds of people in Botlokong in Bethlehem in the Free State yesterday. He described those who call for Zuma's head as criminals who do not appreciate the strides made by the current administration. His comments came a few days after an extended meeting of the ANC's National Executive Committee outside Pretoria, at which a number of senior party members, some of them cabinet ministers, reportedly called for a vote to remove Zuma as head of the ANC. The ANC said after the meeting that no vote had been taken and that Zuma would remain party leader. Scores of people are feared dead after a church collapsed during a service in northern Nigeria. Local media are giving tolls of 50 or more killed or seriously injured. A pastor was reportedly about to be consecrated during the church service in the southern city of Uyo when the building collapsed. And Cape Town City are the new champions of the 2016 Telkom knockout. Well, this after Eric Tinkler's troops earned a hard-fought 2-1 win over SuperSport United out at the Peter Mokaba Stadium in Polokwane yesterday. Let's welcome our guest this morning. On the panel, we do have political analyst Mr. Levi Ndor, as well as Ms. Dinesh Palia, journalism lecturer at Wits University. Ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. And of course, for the big hashtags of the week, we do have our very own SABC multimedia producer, Mr. Neo Motloung. Neo, a very good morning to you. What a busy week. I'm sure you were also busy on the digital front.
A busy
Take
week,
it
Alicia.
away. What was the biggest one in terms of the
biggest story has
week?
to be remembering Madiba. I mean, it's been 3 years since our statesman passed away, and people on social media were really engaged with this topic. I mean, some were calling him a very well-groomed statesman and will never have a leader like him. I mean, let's just check what the tweets are saying.
Yeah.
I mean, you have one tweet say, one of the greatest and brightest human being in the history, Nelson Mandela, may his legacy continue, guide us forever, and big ups to him. This is what people are saying. I mean, he was such a great man, but also on this day, people were remembering Robert Sobukwe. That hashtag also made news where people were saying it's his birthday and he should be remembered, and some were also calling for his birthday to be made a national holiday. So it's an interesting story. It's an interesting date, actually, because moving on to our next story about the LGBT activist who got murdered in Cape Town, whose body was also found on Monday morning.
My goodness.
Allegedly, it's a hate crime. It's a hate crime because it's reported that she was murdered by a group of men, and some people really took to social media to bring the story. And this story actually broke on social media, Alicia, before any news agency brought the story up.
What did they say?
Let's see what they're saying on Twitter. I mean, LG says she was a close friend, and she says, may her soul rest in peace. She was my best friend, such a sweet soul. And when you read the following tweet, I mean, she's saying the following tweet actually by Nicole is quoting other activists who have been who have been killed in this hate crime. And as we spoke earlier on, there are a number of lesbian people in the LGBT community who have been killed before.
Corrective rape, yeah.
Corrective rape. But the government came out also to say that they are putting measures on to stop this. The Western Cape also, police came out saying that they are going to prioritize these cases because that's where mostly it happens.
You know, Dinesh, all this happening during the 16 days of activism, what was your reaction to this story?
I was horrified that yet again we have another instance of corrective rape and murder, actually. And I think one of the things that we've done as a country in the last couple of years is recognized corrective rape as a hate crime.
Absolutely.
And that was a fantastic move for our country particularly. It's not something that happens across the continent, but a significantly positive outcome, actually.
Levi, what do you think?
You know, it's obviously quite disturbing, you know, especially when in South Africa there is a lot of consciousness about violence against children and women.
Yeah.
And you still get this kind of behavior. And I think it's time for all of us as a nation to stand together and say, at some point, this has to come to an end.
Absolutely. And wouldn't it be such a better period to say that and you know, utter that message during the 16 days of activism? I mean, I really don't understand the things that happen sometimes, but let's move on and look at the next big hashtags of this week now. Coincidentally, on Mandela Day as well. What an eventful day.
It was an eventful day. I think we should
goodness.
all stay away from December the 5th. As you can see, the president actually did send his condolences to his family. I mean, saying that he's a great loss to the country. I mean, he passed away at 37 due to kidney failure. The story also came out on Monday morning, and it was also a big hashtag. He was buried yesterday, but this is what people are saying. You have Unati saying very sad news, condolences to the whole Ngwane family, and you have Nonkosi saying it is so sad that he has been prematurely taken away from us, and may his soul rest in peace. So it's a really moving story. I mean, no one was expecting this. I mean, he was not ill, according to us, but yeah.
Very interesting. And you know, it just goes to show you how short life is actually, Dinesh.
And quite honestly, 2016 must fall right now.
Imagine,
because it keeps on taking.
Yeah.
Just keeps on taking.
What did you think?
Well, you know, Sfiso touched a lot of people.
Yeah.
Especially with his unique voice and the way in which he worshipped. You know, you would be convinced that he is the man who really knew God. And, you know, when he passed on, I'm one of those who have been playing his latest CD. And, you know, it was like maybe with Dreaming of the World is actually come to an end. He's still very young. And I thought he still had a lot to offer. But unfortunately, God has his own ways.
Absolutely. Now we'll take us to our final hashtag of this week. It looks like
This
it was
is
such
a lighter hashtag. If Malema was president, also started trending this week.
When did this start trending?
Monday.
What did they
It also
say?
broke news on Monday. People were really saying that the police won't act the way they're acting now. I mean, he says cops would not behave as they do now, killing innocent people. And you have Notando saying South Africa would be no home for racists. Racism was going to be a crime. I mean, we've seen incidents of racism in the country recently with Facebook posts and with Penny also, you know, facing the law this year. So it's been a very hectic year when it comes to racism and posts. And there are still posts coming out of racism nature. So people are really calling for Malema to be president. And
Dinesh, if Malema was president...
Then I'd have to wear red. I don't wear red. So I'd be stuck.
Well, I think it's also a response to the manner in which there seems to be some degree of leniency on racism. And... well, it can be Malema, it can be anybody else, but I think racism is about us. It's not about anybody else. It's about how we relate with one another,
Absolutely.
how we respond to each other. And I think it does not need an individual. It's about all of us as South Africans to build a non-racial society.
Aha, now isn't that a great message then?
great
No,
message.
thank you so much. We're going to see you next week. But before I let you go, tell them where they can find all these stories that you've been telling us about this morning.
You can go to www.sabc.co.za. That's our website. For this show, it's on YouTube, streaming live. that would be SABC Online on YouTube.
All right, and look out for Media Monitor at 10 o'clock. We're going to be done. Let's take a quick ad break, and after that, we celebrate 20 years since the signing of our current constitution. I'll have more after this break. Do stay with us.
Did you know the big hole digging started in 1871 and ended on the 14th August 1914? The hole produced 2,722 kgs of diamonds. However, one diamond as huge as 490 carat of stone found in the open prior 1868 gave them the interest to dig. Extracted from 22.5 million tons of soil. Today, the hole sits at a breathtaking 214 meters deep. Kimberley Big Hole attracts tourists from all over the world, taking a vintage tram past the city, then cycling around the Big Hole.
Welcome back to Media Monitor. Now, yesterday marked the 20th anniversary of the commemoration of the signing of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. The ceremony, which was held on December the 10th in 1996, helped transition our country into a democracy. And although South Africa has made great strides, there are still issues around land reform, racism, as well as economic inequality. Let's take a look at this insert.
In a series of events to mark the day, President Zuma and his deputy Cyril Ramaphosa led events, starting at the Vereeniging Civic Center, where they signed a pledge.
We, the people of South Africa, believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity.
Round of applause.
And then it was off to Sharpeville, where wreaths were laid at the memorial site. It's here where former President Nelson Mandela signed into law the constitution of the country on the 10th of December 1996. And the day's events rounded off with the president addressing a crowd at the George Tabe Sports Ground. He spoke of the need to respect the country's institutions and urged the public to use them.
We urge members of the public to use the Chapter 9 institutions to highlight any possible violations of their rights as stated in the Constitution. I'm sure you hear this very well. Everything is tied together. There's nothing that is loose out there, flying on its own. It's all tied together, harmonized in order to implement our constitutional democracy.
He said the judiciary had an important role to play as it was the final arbiter in all disputes.
To maintain this role, our judiciary needs to jealously guard its independence, impartiality, dignity, accessibility, and effectiveness. Other arms of the state must support the judiciary to maintain this role.
The marking of the 20th anniversary of the Constitution coincides with International Human Rights Day. Mzwane Lembeje, SABC News, Sharpeville.
You know, a lot of people don't realize this is actually our 5th constitution as a country. What does it say to you, Dinesh? What still needs to be done with our Constitution?
I think a lot more people need to be conscientized about the Constitution, what it means,
and
how it affects their lives. You know, I was thinking as the insert was playing about the coffin racism case that was happening. And that individual, that gentleman, please forgive me, I can't remember his name, who was pushed into a coffin, whose human rights were completely flouted, had no sense of how he's protected by the Constitution of this country. And really, it wasn't him that put into place a process to deal with his human rights. It was actually other individuals who saw the video and then took, you know, the necessary steps. So I think it's more conscientizing and more realizing what this Constitution means for us as a country and as individuals.
How do we do that? How do we give that awareness, Levi?
I think firstly, it's about all of us, especially the parents and the teachers at schools, to go out and say, there is a copy of a constitution that I must take responsibility to teach my kids and also to teach the illiterate. There are a lot of people in South Africa who just know that there's a document called a constitution, but they don't know how to relate with the Constitution and how it can actually assist them. And, you know, as part of the curricula, maybe extracurricular activities, you need to have a session where kids are being taught and taught to understand the Constitution and its basics. And I think in South Africa, we're very, very lucky that you have got a number of institutions, media organizations that can also play a part in assisting the population to understand the Constitution better and how it can actually protect them.
Let's talk about that. I mean, there's been a lot of calls for issues like your land reform as well as racism to be actually amended on the Constitution. But it seems like this is a contentious issue as it actually divides the nation, Dinesh.
I think the Constitution is built in such a way that it's all-encompassing. It's, you know, it's vague when it needs to be, it's specific when it needs to be. And I think that is something that's necessary in a transforming society. I think a Constitution can't really be as specific as people would like it to be. Because at the end of the day, we become bound by the same Constitution in the future. So it's very forward-looking. And that's what makes it one of the greatest constitutions in the world.
So that we can make amendments, basically.
Well, the Constitution is crafted in a manner that it does accommodate amendments. There are a number of reasons why a Constitution can be amended. Political environment, economic environment, social environments, they can also assist us to amend the Constitution. It also has a lot to do with our leaders in Parliament. When they interact with members of society on a day-to-day basis, then they are able to identify challenges and then a need to amend the Constitution. But what is very, very important about the Constitution is that it is supposed to protect all of us.
Absolutely.
And one thing very, very important about the Constitution is that we need to avoid a situation where there is an abuse of the Constitution, because that will actually not serve the purpose why we actually have the Constitution at the end of the day.
The President was saying there that, you know, Chapter 9 institutions are very, very important and that people should utilize them. But we go back to that point, Dinesh, where people have all these amenities, but they don't know how to access them or even use them.
I think it's a basic problem in South Africa that people feel that the law exists somewhere else and for certain people. And the reality is, if you look across the kinds of cases that come through the media, for example, it's not very representative of the bulk of our country and the bulk of cases that are actually heard in courts on a daily basis. So the reality is that people feel like the law does not apply to them in terms of protecting them.
Levi?
Maybe one question would be to say, are we ignorant? I don't think we are ignorant. We're just preoccupied with other things. That makes us not to focus on important things like understanding the role of the Chapter 9 institutions. You know the story that we're talking about the fellow that was forced into a coffin. He had to be assisted by other people that this, I'm sorry, this is a violation of your right. And this has to be taken very, very seriously. I don't want to touch on the racial factor, because to me that's something else. But I think we need, as citizens of the Republic, to understand our rights and how the Constitution is then created to protect those rights. And unfortunately, that is one area that is actually missing in our population.
Dinesh, I'm sure you're going to love this one. I mean, let's talk about some of the great strides that have been, enshrined in the Constitution, like your women's rights and equality in the workplace. How far are we when we're saying we're celebrating the 20th anniversary of the signing?
You know, the Constitution for me is a wonderful document, but it is still a document. And I think the President is right in that he says that all the different institutions, all the different parts of this country work holistically together, and there are no loose ends as such. And I think what we're still having to achieve is to make sure that the whole system works well together to achieve what it is that the Constitution aims to achieve. So it's really moving us forward holistically. And I think part of the issues that we have is that we're still, and I know people don't like to hear us say this, but we're still a growing democracy. We're still learning about how these systems work together. We're still learning about how we move this constitutional democracy forward. And that will happen generation by generation, but we've still got a long way to go.
Levi,
We're quite fortunate in South Africa because we have taken a bold decision to take our women very seriously and say women can still do it in every sector. And that's why you'll get a lot of parastatals, government departments and ministries being run by women. And they're actually doing exceptionally well. I know that there are instances where some people wouldn't love to give all the necessary support to women. But that is quite unfortunate. In South Africa, we're moving forward. We're saying that women can do it,
should be a law
and we need
against
to give them all the support that they deserve.
I will say, though, you know, as much as we've moved forward in terms of women's rights and making sure that we have representation, we have fantastic representation in government, we have good representation in business and the private sector. On the ground, though, is where we're lacking. You know, when it comes to social access for women, grants for women, education for women, making sure that women are empowered to be able to live their lives individually without access to individuals men. Should I just put it out? Let's not skirt around the issue. But without having access to men, in order to build their lives individually. We have a lot of women-headed households in this country, and those households do not have access that we want to have them have in order to build this democracy and move this country forward. So on the ground is where we're lacking. We need people to have the kind of access that people up at the top have.
You know, this brought into question also the fact that, what does our Constitution actually say about free education, as we've just seen the Fees Must Fall protest, Levi?
Well, South African government has taken education very, very seriously. You'll observe that there are a lot of free fee schools in the rural areas. They don't pay anything. And at least the government is moving forward with the commissions and the engagements that are going on. But what is very, very important is that in South Africa we need quality education. We must start with quality. Free education is also very, very important because if you look at the different classes in society, you'll agree with me that we've got a lot of people that are poor, and even though they're poor, they still need education. And that is exactly what we need. I think government has to relook at budgeting. Education is a priority, we know, but then let's look at budgeting and put a lot of resources onto education so that the notion of free education can then be realized.
All right. Well, hey, that's where we're going to leave it on that topic. We're going to take a quick ad break, and after that, more Media Monitor.
The Kalahari Transportier Park is a large wildlife preserve and conservation area in southern Africa. Kalahari means place of thirst. The total area is 38,000 square kilometers. Approximately 3/4 of the park lie in Botswana and 1/4 in South Africa. South Africa embraced the concept of transportiers linking ecological reserves across national borders. On the 12th of May 2000, President Festus Mogae of Botswana and Thabo Mbeki of South Africa formally launched South Africa's first peace park. It has 200 species of birds, including vultures, mammalians such as black Kalahari lions, and large herds of herbivores, namely earlands, springboks, blue wildebeest, and more.
Welcome back to Media Monitor. Former ANC Northern Cape boss John Block and his business partner Christo Schultz have been finally sentenced to an effective 15 years in jail each for fraud and corruption after a 4-year marathon trial. Now, Block was accused of having used his political power to influence lease agreement tenders to be directed to Schultz's company Trifecta Group Holdings in return for kickbacks. They've both since appealed the conviction and sentencing, and the matter is now scheduled to be heard in February of next year. But here's more on this insert.
We are convinced that there is no court that will come to a different conclusion. The trial was fair according to our observation, and the kind of sentence that has been imposed on the accused, it's a fair sentence.
We are hoping that the things will pin out differently, but we accept the outcomes, and we also want to reaffirm that Comrade John has got full rights to appeal the decision. His legal team made indications that they are going to appeal the decision. We are firmly behind that because we firmly believe in his innocence.
Geez, what took so long? I mean, 4 years to resolve the case, Levi? What do you think happened there?
Well, firstly, we need to go back and look at what the different political parties were saying during the campaigns. There was a lot of emphasis on corruption. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, the very same constitution that we're talking about would also give space to any person who is accused to have fair representation, and there are a number of processes.
Appeals,
that's why it will take
reviews.
time. But very, very importantly is that in South Africa, we adhere to the principle of the supremacy of the constitution and the rule of law. And all citizens in South Africa are equal. Now, if there is a case that is standing before you and you go to all the processes, you go to court and you're found guilty, you just have to face the consequences. I think I would love to hear what other leaders, especially in the ANC, are saying. There are those who are saying that we support John Block, because he still is going through these processes, he must appeal and so on and so on. But the emphasis should be that in South Africa, we have got laws, and all of us are equal before the laws. And if you're found guilty, you just have to face the consequences. That is as simple as that. And that's the constitution that we have adopted, and we all want to embrace.
Dinesh?
I'm not sure he's going to see jail time. I think he was found guilty in October last year. Sentencing has just happened a year later. The appeals will take probably another year. We wait to see. It's actually 15 years for corruption, 12 years for money laundering. You know, they're being served or should be served concurrently, but I'm not sure that, you know, Mr. Block will be seeing the inside of that block.
But now, don't you think that a lot of people, a lot of politicians, so to speak, will actually take Block's fate as a harsh warning and, you know, something to look up to say, you know what, I'm not even going to be involved in any corrupt matters?
It is a fantastic deterrent. Let's not beat around the bush there. I think it's fantastic that, you know, an individual who's so highly respected, who has such prominence, has been put through this process, has felt the full force of the law in South Africa. And that is exactly what we want to see. And exactly what you said earlier is that, you know, post-election time, we want to be able to see those kinds of things happening. South Africans want to feel comfortable again. We've gone through a very difficult year. We want to feel like this country is going somewhere. And I think this is a very positive move for us.
You know, Mr. John Block was actually viewed as one of the ruling party's, one of the biggest, you know, exactly, germs, and he was on his way to one of the top positions. But what do you think happens to his political career now? I mean, 15 years, still with the appeal.
There's no doubt about that. John Block is a powerful figure in the ANC politics in the province. He has been involved in the ANC structures for a very, very long time. I think in the circles, in the political circles, they'll say it's a very, very good comrade. They say he has actually succeeded in uniting the ANC in the province. But that is totally different to corrupt activities. You can be a very good leader,
This wasn't a judge
very
of
good
ethics,
person, but you can still be corrupt.
Exactly.
That's another area that we need to look at.
Unfortunately.
And unfortunately, we need to separate the two. That we're not dealing with a person who is unifying the party, who is a big wing in the ANC, no. We're dealing with a person who is accused of corruption. And the law doesn't care about what you did in the past. And that is why President Zuma yesterday was emphasizing that we've got the separation of power. You've got the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. And they just have to be given space to exercise their responsibilities.
All right, well, that's where we leave it on that matter. Let's look at another big story now of this week's. Hawks boss Berning Ntlemeza is facing renewed legal charges. The Helen Suzman Foundation and Freedom Under Law have both approached the High Court in Pretoria to have him removed from his position. Now, the two organizations say Ntlemeza was unlawfully, irregularly and irrationally appointed by the Police Minister, Nathi Nhleko, based on two previous judgments which had found him to be dishonest as well as lacking honor and integrity. This, of course, after Ntlemeza had suspended KwaZulu-Natal boss Hawks head Major General Johan Boysen, as well as his Gauteng counterpart Shadrack Sibiya last year. Here's more on this insert.
The two lobby groups want the court to set aside Ntlemeza's appointment by Police Minister Nathi Nhleko. They argued that Ntlemeza's appointment was irrational and unlawful. Nhleko appointed him despite the fact that two court judgments made adverse findings against him. In those judgments, Ntlemeza was described as dishonest and lacking integrity.
If the man can't be trusted, even under oath, then there's a problem about his integrity and his ability to act independently without fear or favor.
Nhleko's lawyers hit back, arguing that Ntlemeza's appointment was legal and rational as there was a vigorous interview process. The lawyers also downplayed the adverse findings.
We wish to make the following submission up front, that these remarks are not findings, neither are they decision of the court. They remain those remarks which are made in the course of writing a judgment by any judge dealing with a particular matter.
The matter will continue for a second day on Wednesday. It's being heard by a full bench of 3 judges. Sipho Stirman, SABC News, Pretoria.
I think let's go back here to the question, did the police minister actually act unlawfully by appointing Ntlemeza to his position, even though after the court judgment? Levi, what did you think?
Well, it depends on what he was facing at the time. Obviously, there are a lot of areas that we have to look at before you appoint a person in such positions. But one has to look at the track record of Mr. Ntlemeza, that he has been in the system for a very, very long time. He has been in a number of provinces, executing the same responsibilities. And I think now there might be some information that will come out now that will require certain people to say, we're not comfortable with this person occupying this position. And I think also you need the police minister and other senior government officials to come up in the public and say, these are some of the issues that we looked at when we appointed this person. Because when you have a person in that kind of a position and there is suspicion and a cloud hanging over that person, it creates some element of discomfort, especially on those that want to see some element of justice happening in that kind of a department.
I must say, I feel I'm slightly suspicious about the motives of the actual appeal to have his appointment set aside. Yeah. I don't know enough about what's happened in the past and what that paper trail is telling us, but I do feel slightly suspicious. I think, you know, one of the things we need to acknowledge is his involvement in the very famous SARS case that's been going on, the finance minister and so on and so forth. And I feel that the timing of this particular approach to have him set aside is questionable. If there's something there, if he's been found to be dishonest, then people are watching him closely. People are going to pay more attention. He hasn't proven that dishonesty as yet in his position as the horse head, but yet there's this case to have him set aside. So I'm not sure what the motives are, is what I'm saying.
Speaking of motives, Dinesh, do you think there could have been any other motives to put him in that position in the first place?
There's always a motive. There is always a motive. I don't think these things are as black and white as we would like them to be, particularly appointments of such significance. I think there's always an agenda, there's always a motive, and that's important to acknowledge. It doesn't mean that it's wrong. Sometimes it's just a matter of acknowledging it and paying attention to it.
And also, one other aspect to note is that these are positions that cannot just be occupied by anybody.
That's true.
And obviously, they'll have to look at what he has done in the past, his track record in his responsibilities. But also, in South Africa, we've got this challenge that is facing all of us. We always want to politicize everything. There is always a suspicion in every act that actually happens. And it affects the credibility of our own institutions. And sometimes we lose very good people because of this kind of behavior. Hence, I support the suspicion that we have. That sometimes we cannot have very good people occupy certain positions because you'll still have somebody saying there is one dot that is there on your shirt and you can't just occupy that position.
You need to deal with it. Speaking of credibility, I mean, what if now the courts find against the police minister and Ntlemeza? What is the impact of that judgment on the organization itself now, Dinesh?
Well, we go back to being headless. We go back
goodness.
to not having leadership. And, I worry about the amount of time that we're spending in courts when these organizations have significant work to do and to pay attention to. What happens to the individuals who are looking for leadership?
And even besides that, even before the ruling, what happens on the cases that they've dealt with previously? What happens to them? Because I'm sure a lot of people are going to say, he wasn't fit enough to hold office, so let's review that matter. Very quick one, Liva.
I think we cannot afford a situation in which we don't have strategic positions filled in that area, because it actually creates a situation where the very same institutions that are created by our own constitutions becomes dysfunctional. And it's up to all of us to say, let's give support to all these people that are given these responsibilities, but we're watching you very closely if there is a cloud hanging over your head. And also, it also gives him a chance to say, I must prove these people wrong, that I have credibility and I can deliver on the mandate given to me.
Somebody said yesterday, very wise words. He says that, people need to be aware that when you have power, it comes with certain responsibilities. Well, we're going to take a quick ad break. And after that, the introduction of child passports to crack down child traffickers is coming up shortly after this break. Stay tuned.
The Kalahari Transportier Park is a large wildlife preserve and conservation area in southern Africa. Kalahari means place of thirst. The total area is 38,000 square kilometers. Approximately 3/4 of the park lie in Botswana and 1/4 in South Africa. South Africa embraced the concept of transportiers linking ecological reserves across national borders. On the 12th of May 2000, President Festus Mogae of Botswana and Thabo Mbeki of South Africa formally launched South Africa's first peace park. It has 200 species of birds, including vultures, mammalians such as black Kalahari lions, and large herds of herbivores, namely elands, springboks, blue wildebeest, and more.
We're back with some good news now. The Department of Home Affairs has introduced a passport for children to make their travel legal and easier. The department says it hopes the document will assist in curbing child trafficking. South Africa has also had its fair share of human trafficking, as over 30,000 minors are said to be trafficked through the country's borders annually. The new passport will become available next year. Let's take a look at this insert.
For all South Africans, an unabridged birth certificate when leaving the country is a must. It's mandatory. But it is important to emphasize that we will want from everybody irrefutable evidence of the relationship between the parent, between the adult traveling with the minor child and the minor child, in order to curb the scourge of child trafficking.
I'm very pleased to be joined on the line by Mr. Mkhuseli Apleni, the Director General and Acting DDG from Home Affairs, the department, to give us more details about the child passport. A very good morning to you, Mr. Apleni. Thank you so much for joining us on Media Monitor.
Good morning to you and the viewers.
Baba, do tell us, what is the difference between the recently introduced unabridged birth certificate and the new child passport?
Well, those are two different things. A passport is a passport, and then a birth certificate is what we record when the child was born. And then before, we were only having what we called a abridged birth certificate, which was only recording the name of the child and the date when the child was born and the ID number. But when we went back to the countries of the world after 1994, there was a pressure that for people to travel abroad, they needed a certificate which has got the details of the parents in addition to the ones which I've just mentioned. Therefore, to differentiate between an abridged and unabridged birth certificate. So that's what we had in South Africa. Now, when we were introducing now the new regulations that people who are traveling to South Africa must also carry this document, there was a confusion on the basis that in the world there's nothing called unabridged, it is called a birth certificate. So the first step enough for us was to change the naming convention to move from what we called unabridged to a birth certificate. However, the details are the same. Then now to ease enough for parents now to travel, because for you, you need, if you are traveling with a child, to carry this birth certificate. Then we decided to say, why can't we print the details of the parents into the passport so that we don't need now to carry the birth certificate.
Mr. Apleni, how is this new child passport now going to work? I mean, how old must the child be, and when will it be available in the country?
Well, a passport, any child who's under 18 years has to carry a birth certificate when he's traveling outside the country. So the passport will be the same now, that when that child is still under 18, you will always have that passport. But what is fortunate about it, a parent of a child does not change. Once now you apply for that passport at once, that child until dies, he will always have those details of the parent in the passport. But it's just that now it won't be looked at once now it passes the age of 18 years. Then we are planned to start printing this passport by next year, February 2017.
Okay. Now, Mr. Apleni, you also say that you hope that this new document will actually assist the department in curbing child trafficking. Do tell us, I mean, from the department's stance, just how rife is this problem and how is the department currently dealing with it? Any successes in catching the perpetrators?
Well, those reports are not coming from Home Affairs. Remember now the Department of Social Development is what is responsible for that. But what we are saying, what this will work as a deterrent is that at least when a person is traveling with the child, that person must be able to to demonstrate and prove that the child that I'm traveling with is my child, or if it is not my child, there is a consent from the parent I'm traveling with. So if now a person is crossing with a child in the ports of entry, that helps us that we are able now to return children who are coming and those who are going out. However, if people are traveling and taking the child through the borderline in an illegal way, yes, those ones won't be able to pick it up. And as well, if is within the country, as Home Affairs were also not party to that, but is when the children are crossing outside the country where we're able now to be helping as one of the security points.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Apleni, for that update. That is the acting DDG as well as DG of the Department of Home Affairs, Mr. Kuseli Apleni, is talking to us about the introduction of the new child passport. But what did you think about this? Do you think it is going to assist with the current problems that we have with the ports of entry when it comes to child trafficking and other crimes that are associated with our borders?
Child trafficking has been a very, very big problem. And I think one must appreciate that the Department of Home Affairs is coming up with strategies to prevent child trafficking. In a number of countries, you don't hear of IDs. You only hear of passports.
Yeah.
And I think it's also important that there should be some form of control, especially in the borders, because a lot of children are being taken out of the Republic for a number of reasons.
30,000
illegally.
children.
And you know, if you look at the figures, 30,000 is just a lot. But I think we need to appreciate it might be difficult administratively for all of us and also with traveling. But I think I must be able to explain at the border that I'm with Alicia's daughter and Alicia agrees that I must cross the border with this daughter.
Yeah.
And that will actually make our children safe.
Absolutely.
We are saying that we need to protect our women. We want to protect our children. Let's give the thumbs up to the Department of Home Affairs that they are trying their best to ensure that our kids are properly protected.
Thumbs up for the department, Dinesh.
You know, when the unabridged birth certificate was introduced in terms of travel with children, I was all for it. I don't think that kind of inconvenience, the impact of it can be overlooked. We don't just have child traffickers, we have people who are disappearing with children because of divorce cases or custody disputes, who have the ability to take a child abroad because they're the mother or the father.
In Egypt,
Absolutely. And South Africa is very good in that we don't really have to see those instances because of our border control mechanisms. And this is exactly what you say. It's to protect each of us. It's to protect our children. It is very inconvenient to get those documents. And so this passport is a mechanism to address that kind of inconvenience. So it can only be beneficial in the future.
You know, we're talking, Levi, you stated that the issue of child trafficking is a huge one, but it seems like it's just not getting enough spotlight in the media. What do we still need to do as a country to pay homage or to rather highlight the scourge in child trafficking?
You know, I think there has been a lot of campaigns and awareness about the protection of kids. How many kids got lost on the streets in the townships? Somebody will just call a kid and say, go buy something for me, knowing that there are people waiting for that kid, and the kid disappears.
And these stories we never hear
And
about.
these are the stories that we never hear about. And the very same kids end up crossing the borders. And you know, it might be quite easy to cross the border with a child because the child doesn't even know that now I'm moving to another country. And the child will just be cooperating, and then we'll be moving up and down looking for our kids. We need to assist the department and say, we appreciate the efforts that we've put forward. We will ensure that all the necessary documents are available so that we have our own kids protected. It's so painful to not to know where your child has ended up. And I think the department has come up with the best strategies to ensure that that does not happen again.
All right, well, we're going to take a quick ad break. More Media Monitor shortly after that. Do stay with us.
Sobukwe is a founding member and first president of the Pan-Africanist Congress. His activism led to his incarceration on Robben Island. Now, Sobukwe has been given a voice in the form of an exhibition. His life depicted on life-size canvases. His love for family also recognized.
Even from the comments we heard from the public is saying that he's not actually recognized as a struggle icon like other icons. So they say that there's not even a school named after Robert Sobukwe. So there's really a cry in the ordinary public to say that we are not recognizing Robert Sobukwe to the best of his abilities, that he struggled for freedom as well.
For his family, a long overdue tribute.
He was a man of many interests, which he held dearly.
This is now our final segment of Media Monitor. And this week, the Department of Basic Education approved a decision to promote learners who pass all the subjects but fail to reach the required pass rate of 40% for mathematics. And according to the decision, learners will only need a 20% mark in maths to make it to the next grade. This as the country's schooling system continues to battle with mathematics and science. And one out of three research projects conducted by the Southern and Eastern Africa Consortium for monitoring educational equality. South Africans' average students' math score placed 8th out of the 15 countries. That is very, very worrying. I mean, I remember I had to get 60% marks for maths in order for me to get my exemption in matric, and it wasn't long ago. Levi?
And I think it's important that we take a decision whether we really need mathematics or not. But
How
I think
can
we
you
need
say that, Levi?
If we emphasize 20%, then we don't need mathematics.
Yeah, clearly.
I think what the department must do is to capacitate teachers to be able to offer mathematics to an extent that will say we need 70% mathematics pass.
Absolutely.
20% is just not good enough for me.
Dinesh?
Okay, I'm going to play devil's advocate here on basic education side. It's an interim measure. They're testing it out. It's for grades 7 to 9, so it's not actually affecting our matriculants as yet. It's for maths literacy, which is a different, more watered down. Alicia's giving me the eye right now. More watered down version of mathematics. And anyone who wants to proceed with mathematics from 7 to 9 has to achieve the 40% and above. So it's really a measure to get those students who have passes in all other subjects, but who get stuck in the system because of one grade in mathematics.
The aptitude test type of thing.
It is kind of a thing. The problem is that we have kids who don't fit the conventional schooling system.
Yeah.
And we want those kids to also move on. We don't want to hold them back because they're not excelling in one particular subject. So if they get this condoned pass, they're getting it for math literacy, and they're not allowed to then continue into mathematics. I think that's important to emphasize, that it's not pure mathematics as such. And I think a lot of people got very, very upset when they heard 20% and mathematics. That's not the case as far as I understand it.
Yeah, but there has been that call to actually review the subjects that are being offered to children that they take beyond grade 9, so that the children are not stuck in that system, like you were saying there, Dinesh. Do you think that is going to aid learners to try and develop the skills that they are better at then, Levi?
Maybe we need to identify students who cannot do mathematics.
Yeah.
And channel them to areas where they can excel.
Absolutely.
Rather
See what
than
else they are
forcing
good
them
at.
to take the mathematics route. But I think the department also has to develop strategies to make mathematics attractive and make the students or learners love mathematics. The way kids love speaking in English and a good accent it should also be done with mathematics, so that we should see them making calculations all the time.
Maths is maths. How is it going to be fun, Dinesh?
Maths is always fun, actually. You know, instead, I often say this with my own kids. Instead of teaching kids how to do sums on a piece of paper, take them to the shop.
Make it
Give them
actual.
some money. Let them see how money and currency and numbers work in reality. Because maths can be fun.
Dinesh and Levi, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And thank you at home for watching our show, Media Monitor. We hope that you will join us again next week, same time and place, 9 o'clock sharp here on the SABC News channel. I'm back on top of the hour with A News. Stay right there.